10 years behind bars, not just a sentence of time, but 10 years of shame, loneliness, and torment. He was once someone society had turned its back on, someone his family felt ashamed of, someone who even despised himself. But in that rock-bottom place, he began a journey against the current, not just to survive, but to make amends, to rise again, and to pull others out of the darkness he once fell into. 10 years in prison didn't come from a moment of recklessness, it came from an entire youth lost, full of anger and defiance. He was born in a poor working-class neighborhood, where violence was the norm and trust was a luxury. His father drank heavily, his mother struggled to carry the weight of the family, yet there was never enough. His childhood had no hugs, no praise, only yelling, beatings, and the judgmental stares of others. He grew up in an environment that didn't teach him how to love, only how to survive. By the age of 14, he had dropped out of school and thrown himself into street gangs. Nighttime was when life really began, street racing, petty theft, fights, not out of hatred, but out of a desperate need to be seen. Over time, fear and cruelty became second nature. The crimes escalated. At 19, he took part in an armed robbery. Someone was seriously injured. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and there was no one crying in the courtroom. No family. No friends. Just him, a hardened face trying to look unfazed, while inside, a storm was raging. In those first days behind bars, he was like a shadow. No one cared who he was or where he came from. At night, the fear came, not just fear of others, but fear of himself. The questions began to torment him. What if I hadn't grown up in that neighborhood? What if I had stayed in school? What am I now? A criminal? A lost cause? He had lost everything, his youth, his freedom, his hope, even himself. But when there was nothing left to hold on to, something deep inside him began to stir, something he never knew he had, a desire to change. But the desire to change wasn't enough to save him from reality. He was still in prison. A place where people easily lose their humanity, grow more violent, more ruthless, or fall completely into despair. At first, he lived as he always had, guarded, short-tempered, closed off. On the outside, he was tough, but inside, he was just someone lost, with no idea where he was going or why. And yet, in that place that seemed to hold only darkness, he met the most unexpected people. One of them was an older inmate, once a schoolteacher, who saw him scribbling quietly on a torn piece of paper and asked, "Want to learn again?" That question hit a nerve and a pride that had long since crumbled. Learn again? At his age? In this place? But he nodded. From that moment, each day became a slow step, but at least a step in a direction. He learned how to properly read, write, and do basic math. Then he started reading books. At first because he had to, then because he wanted to. He read about psychology, about people, about mistakes and forgiveness. Every page opened a part of himself he had never known or had long buried. He began working in the prison sewing workshop, then eventually moved to the small library. He held himself to a routine, waking early, exercising, studying, working. Each day, he wrote down his thoughts like having a conversation with himself. It wasn't always smooth. There were days he wanted to give up. Days when guilt crashed over him like waves. But instead of running, he wrote through the pain. He began writing apologies, no one asked him to. He just knew, after all the years of self-punishment, it was time to face things. No one in prison called him a good man. But slowly, he stopped being seen as directionless. The guards began to trust him. Fellow inmates came to ask how to study. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just living for himself. That journey was quiet. No applause. But for the first time, he was truly moving forward for himself. He never forgot what he had done. No matter how hard he tried, the stain of his past remained always quietly present. Some nights, lying on the cold bunk bed, staring at the ceiling, he would still ask himself, "Do I really deserve a second chance?" Rehabilitation had given him discipline, knowledge, but it hadn't erased the pain inside. Then one day, the prison organized a special meeting between inmates and victims' families, a program meant to foster dialogue and healing. He didn't expect anyone to show up. But she came, the woman whose husband had been seriously injured in the robbery he took part in. She sat across from him, calm, her eyes not filled with the hatred he had imagined. Her voice was soft, but firm. "You destroyed my life in one night. Do you know what it was like raising 2 small children alone? But I'm not here to curse you. I just wanted to see, what kind of life is the man living now, the one who brought so much pain to mine?" He couldn't respond. His throat tightened. And for the first time in years, he cried, not from fear, but because he finally saw the truth. The pain he caused wasn't just a line in a report. It was real blood, tears, lives forever changed. After that meeting, something in him truly broke and something else awakened. He no longer tried to reform just to reduce his sentence or prove anything to anyone. He wanted to atone, not because it could ever undo the past, but because it was the only honest thing left to do. He wrote a letter of apology not just to the victim's family, but also to the version of himself from years ago. He began speaking with younger inmates about consequences, about the roads not to take. In that moment, he was no longer just an inmate in rehabilitation. He was someone awakening. And that was the first step toward freedom. Not on paper, but within the soul. He was granted clemency after serving 10 years. The day he walked out of those prison gates, no one was waiting. The sun was blazing, the kind of sun that had symbolized freedom in his dreams for so many years, yet now it felt strange, unfamiliar. Each step outside was a step into a reality he had long dreaded. Society doesn't welcome people like him. He started not from zero, but from below it. No home, no job, no connections. The release papers, still warm in his hands, quickly became the ticket that slammed doors shut before he could even knock. He applied for jobs as a construction helper, a car washer, a mover. Some said yes, but the suspicious eyes never left him. One employer even told him bluntly, "I know you're trying, but I don't want someone with a record on my team." That kind of rejection cut deeper than anything he had experienced inside prison. But this time, he didn't crumble. He didn't run. He kept going. Each day he worked, saved what he could, and continued writing, just like he had behind bars. Then, a chance came during a talk he gave at a social support center. He had been invited to share his journey of rehabilitation. After the event, a middle-aged woman, a coordinator from a nonprofit organization, approached him. She said, "We need someone like you not just to tell a story, but to guide young people standing at the edge." For the first time in years, someone didn't ask what he had done. They asked what he wanted to do now. He said yes. He began teaching life skills workshops, speaking at community education programs, mentoring those recently released from prison. His words weren't theory, they were flesh and blood. Every scar became a living warning for someone else. Coming home wasn't just about being released. For him, it was the journey of standing tall in the light. Carrying his past not to hide it, but to prove that starting over is possible. From someone once rejected by society, he became someone people listened to. Not because he was somebody famous, but because he dared to speak the truths others kept hidden, with raw honesty and wounds still healing. He didn't glorify his past, nor did he seek pity. He spoke so others could avoid the path he took, so those who had fallen could rise again without hating themselves. The deeper he got involved, the clearer it became. Rebuilding your life isn't just about saving yourself, it's about creating chances for others. He began working with various social organizations and eventually started a small group of formerly incarcerated individuals who were trying to rebuild their lives. They helped each other find jobs, learn new skills, and heal emotionally. He called the group Second Ones because everyone deserves a second chance to live with dignity. There were many times he was met with doubt, even threats. Some said, "You did what you did, what gives you the right to teach others?" In those moments, he stayed quiet, no justifying, no defending. Because he understood, real change doesn't come from words, but from how you live, day by day. Now, every morning, he wakes up with one clear goal: to make sure no one who's fallen into darkness like he once did has to walk alone. He makes no grand promises, only this: that change is real, when you believe your life still has meaning. He still lives simply, rents a small room, teaches, volunteers, provides legal and emotional support to those reintegrating into society. But deep down, he knows he's no longer the same man. Not because others have forgiven him, but because he's learned to forgive himself, and to turn his mistakes into something meaningful. To live on, for him, isn't to forget the past, but to use it to light the way for those still lost in the dark. Now, when he looks back, he no longer calls those 10 years in prison a loss. He calls them a beginning, painful, but necessary. A point where he was forced to face himself, to strip away the layers of wrong with the very hands and heart that once lost their way. He doesn't promise to be perfect. But every day, he chooses to live with integrity. To open doors for those who've had them slammed shut. To give what he once longed for the most, belief. Because there's one simple, profound truth. No one is born a criminal. And no one, if they truly want to, is beyond the chance to start over. If you're feeling lost, if you've made mistakes, remember this. Life doesn't have just one door. You may have to take the long way around. You may endure skeptical stares. But as long as you don't turn your back on yourself, the light will still be there. And who knows? Maybe one day, you will be the one lighting the way for someone else.